Hello there my fellow gamers. We only have a few months left for 2024, and considering that we also have quite the shopping season in front of us and most likely will not see any new gaming laptops hitting the market, I thought how about we take a step back and have a look at what's been released in the past 10 months. I would like to kick things off with compact gamers today, focusing on smaller machines that combine gaming creature comforts like G-Sync, fast displays and a ton of ports with the necessary computing grunt to run today's AAA titles without breaking too much of a sweat, in a still somewhat easy to carry around package. In 2024, we not only saw the obligatory refreshes and slight spec bumps, but also completely new form factors, and some companies also dipped their toes into the smallish performance laptop field for the very first time. One such company is entering the ring with two completely new laptops today, and ACER's ACER Helios Neo 14 as the higher and mid-range option and the Nitro 14 in the budget segment will take on the more established competition. And well, they might have a very hard time to be honest, but I do not want to get ahead of myself here. Razer's Blade 14 is of course a force to be reckoned with, still sporting one of the fastest RTX 4070s to this date. And if you prefer something sleeker and more subtle, you may have had a look at Asus's completely new Zephyrus G14 already, trading performance for an even slimmer chassis. I also want to add XMG's Fusion and Core 15 into the mix. These might sport bigger displays and chassis, but still pack a ton of performance into very sleek all-metal bodies with quite the I/O assortment. Before we get into actually comparing our contenders today, let me give you a quick overview of what we are dealing with individually, and we will kick things off with the newcomers from ACER. The new Nitro 14 basically marks your entry level into the world of compact gamers, and alongside a 110W RTX 4060, you will get a Ryzen 5 8645HS and a 120Hz QHD Plus panel, and the bare minimum in RAM and storage. Moving up to the Helios gives you a considerable spec bump across the board, with a Meteor Lake Core Ultra 9, a 125W RTX 4070, 32GB of RAM, a 1TB SSD and a higher-res G-Sync panel running at 165Hz. For XMG's Fusion, we tested both the 4070 and 4060 versions of the sleek barebones and the AMD-powered Core 15 that bets on the Ryzen 7 8845HS, while our two Intel variants put a 14900HX in the slim chassis. So let us see what this nets us regarding performance, temperatures and fan noise. All SKUs share very high power limits of 140W for their respective GPUs, 32GB of RAM, a 1TB SSD and a QHD Plus 240Hz IPS panel. While we already did a video for the Blade 14 and the Zephyrus, as a quick refresher, Razer's compact powerhouse comes with the before mentioned RTX 4070 running at 140W, AMD's Ryzen 9 8945HS, 32GB of RAM, 1TB of storage and a fast IPS panel. The Zephyrus G14 basically matches the Blade's config, albeit at much lower power levels, but more on that later, but comes with faster if soldered memory and a 120Hz G-Sync OLED. When it comes to the chassis of our contenders, we can divide them into two groups, the truly compact and the somewhat compact. While the Blade and especially the Zephyrus are very small in exterior dimensions, the two ACER models are quite beefy and appear downright massive next to the G14. Of course, the XMG is the biggest notebook of the bunch, which I would say is fair considering the larger display. However, since it's actually a bit slimmer and not as steep, it takes up a similar amount of space on your desk or in your backpack as the Nitro and the Helios. The overall quality of the chassis is also vastly different between all of them, but even the Nitro 14, with its primarily plastic body, is not a poorly made laptop. You get a little bit of flex in the keyboard area if you are really looking for it, but with stiff hinges and an overall very sturdy construction, our most affordable notebook today does not give us any real reason to complain about here. The Helios adds a metal button cover and slims down the chassis ever so slightly, but it still relies on the mostly plastic yet sturdy construction. That is not a bad thing per se, but considering that both the Zephyrus and our XMG models come in at similar price points, depending on their configuration, and sport metal chassis all around, the Helios appears a bit blunt if you put it next to the others. While the hinges might be a bit wobbly for the Fusion and to that extent for the core models as well, the clean metal chassis is quite impressive for the XMG's barebones roots. It also uses its slightly bigger overall footprint to accommodate a numpad, and with its very subtle appearance, it might be the most office-friendly companion in our comparison group today. For the Zephyrus, we can keep it short, it is still as compact and well made as ever, and while you can still see the underlying ROG DNA all around, it is still understated enough, and the overall quality feel leaves no room for complaints. That leaves us with the Blade, and well, it's simply the benchmark for high-end laptop construction, with perfectly adjusted hinges, a clean design and no flex anywhere. You just have to live with the fingerprint situation. Alright, let's talk ports. On the right, the XMG comes with a pair of USB-A's and the only full-size SD card reader for today. The Helios and the Nitro exchange one USB-A for USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 at the HDMI 2.1 on this side and a micro SD card reader, while the Razer has to make do without one. Both the Blade and the ROG bet on the faster USB 3.2 Gen 2 standard across the board, while the G14 has the edge with the fastest card reader amongst all of these puppies. On the opposite side, the Zephyrus adds the power connector, HDMI, USB-C 4, its second USB-A and the headphone jack. The Blade mirrors the layout from its right side, minus the HDMI, while both ACER notebooks again share their port arrangement. As a nice touch, the Nitro still gets a USB 4 port despite its slightly lower price point. The XMG adds another USB-A and USB-C to its pretty impressive arsenal, even though these are both just 3.2 Gen 1, so no power delivery or display signal for the C variant. At the back, the slim 15-incher takes advantage of the additional space and adds a network jack, HDMI, the power connector and a USB-C Thunderbolt port for the Intel models. It's just a 3.2 Gen 2 for the AMD variant though, which does get an additional mini display port to make up for that limitation. So to sum it up, even though we are talking about compact laptops, all of them definitely do not sacrifice connectivity, and you should find almost everything you need on a daily basis. When it comes to maintenance, both the Razer and the XMG share quite some flexibility under the hood. While the Fusion and Core use their bigger chassis to accommodate 2 SODIMMs and a pair of NVMe slots, the Blade still allows for swappable RAM and a single NVMe slot despite the much smaller footprint. The ROG keeps the same storage upgrade options, but the RAM is soldered, and as the biggest head scratcher ever, both ACER notebooks cannot offer much more despite the much larger chassis. So the RAM is soldered for both of them and you only get a single NVMe slot. Regarding input quality, I have to give it to Asus here. With a very generous amount of travel, a clear pressure point and an overall very satisfying typing experience, it's a great keyboard for typing and gaming alike. In my opinion, the XMG is taking second place with a more spacious layout and the addition of a numpad. The switches are not quite as tactile as the ones in the G14, but it's still a very pleasant typing experience. Acer's offerings are alright, but they bottom out quite soft and do not offer much in terms of feedback, which takes quite some time to get used to, at least for me. The Blade gives you this feedback and I generally like the feel, however you only get very shallow travel, which I am personally not the biggest fan of. But you do get the largest trackpad ever with those perfectly weighted clicks. The Nitro, Helios and ROG offer a similar if slightly less refined experience, while the XMG has a bit of a sharper click. Overall though, we had no complaints about any clickpads here. The display situation is quite good for all of our contenders today, with both the Razer and the ROG pulling ahead slightly. While the Zephyrus comes with all the OLED benefits like super deep blacks, high contrast and the best factory calibration, the Razer is not too far off with a very high quality IPS panel, with snappy response times and no PWM. The XMG also performs quite alright, even though we got completely different numbers, despite the fact that both the Intel and AMD models use the same panel. The Core sacrifices contrast and black levels for the highest brightness results of all laptops here, whereas both notebooks deliver full sRGB coverage and good enough factory calibration. The Fusion takes the edge with faster response times, which is again quite weird. While we would wish the Predator screen would get a bit brighter and cover more color volume to match the Helios' price tag, it's a good screen with solid results. The Nitro comes with similar core specs, but it's the slowest panel overall, which might lead to a less than stellar experience in faster games. But let's finally talk performance right off the bat, and as a big surprise to absolutely no one, the Fusion 15 easily beats all of them by quite a significant margin. But that's what you get when you put the absolute unit of a mobile CPU, the i9-14900HX, in such a small chassis. Apart from the Nitro 14 though, all other laptops perform within spitting distance to each other, while the Ryzen 5 with its 6-core config is naturally slightly behind. Our PC Mark runs paint a similar picture, though interestingly the AMD-powered Core 15 with its 4060 beats the Intel-powered 4070 sibling, while the Blade 14 is very close to both. The other three basically deliver almost the same results, and subjectively you will have more than enough horsepower for almost everything you can do with a notebook, including your gaming needs. And by the way, if you are after more detailed performance results for each notebook, make sure to visit our written review. On our website you can find individual Cinebench scores, for example, if that tickles your fancy, and with our handy dandy search bar you can quickly find any other notebook to compare our scores to. Moving over to the GPU side of things, 3D Mark reveals quite a few surprises. As I have mentioned before, the Blade 14 still boasts one of the, if not the fastest 4070 of all notebooks we have tested so far. Even so, the XMG also, once again, makes great use of its bigger chassis and delivers what you would expect from both Nvidia's mid-range mobile GPUs. The Nitro is quite a surprise, keeping up quite well here, while both the ROG and the Helios do not quite perform up to snuff. While I would be willing to forgive the Zephyrus, after all we are talking about a really small notebook here, the numbers we got from the much bigger Predator are simply disappointing. Maybe combining the higher end Core Ultra 9 with a 4070 wasn't the best decision here, since it seems like both core components have to fight for the available resources. For the creators amongst you guys who rely heavily on GPU acceleration, our Blender runs are good news for almost all notebooks. Again, the G14 falls behind slightly because of its lower power levels. That said, I tried the Zephyrus, the Blade and the Fusion for our videos, and I was able to edit away without any real problems. You might have to reduce the render resolution slightly if you're working with heavier codecs, which is quite fine to be honest on such small displays. Before we continue with our regular content, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. Together with Nvidia and our German retail partner Notebooksbilliger, we are going to tell you how we utilize Team Green's latest 40 series GPU architecture and Nvidia's studio validated laptops for our video production. We use DaVinci Resolve to edit our videos for the channel, and Blackmagic Software Suite just loves a fast dedicated GPU. In addition to the more traditional editing workflow, it also features a few AI tools that are actually useful and immensely accelerated by Nvidia's Tensor cores. In addition, their studio validation ensures that you get the complete package, with color-accurate displays, fast CPUs, a ton of RAM for some intense multitasking, and an overall capable computing companion for all of your content creation endeavors. Please follow the links below to learn more and head on over to Notebooksbilliger's website to start shopping right away. And do not forget to check out the full video on the channel. In our gaming rating, a selection of mostly older games that ask for both CPU and GPU grunt, the Fusion again has the edge because of its much faster CPU. Even though the AMD sibling with a 4060 is able to beat the Blade here. The Helios Neo 14 can once again only barely hold a candle against its much lower spec family member, and the ROG, well, it performs alright, but it's very far from what you could get theoretically out of a 4070. As always, we use Cyberpunk for a more GPU-bound comparison, and only the G14 and the Helios are falling behind once more. Again, for the ROG the situation is quite clear. Asus opted for lower wattages to enable the slim chassis and keep temps and noise down, while there is simply not a real explanation for the Helios, especially since the Nitro performs better with a 4060. Unfortunately, I cannot give you individual FPS numbers for all the games we tested for each laptop in this video, otherwise I would be talking for an hour or so. However, once again, on our website you can find a ton of additional gaming benchmarks. Cramming a lot of power into small chassis is awesome, but it also has significant disadvantages, mostly heat and noise. Our measurements reveal quite high but expected results for the XMG models and the Razer, and very tolerable numbers from the ROG, and here you can see the benefits of its lower performance figures. Despite its lackluster gaming prowess, the Helios Neo 14 is still quite noisy, while the Nitro 14 is simply crazy. As always, I also recorded some noise samples during gaming, so you can get a more nuanced and subjective impression of how individual power levels relate to FPS, temperatures and noise. I also added a test for the speakers, but to be quite honest, it's not really a competition, and there's a reason we use the G14 as a reference in all of our reviews. So how about battery life? After all, you would want to use these away from the wall, and while you should not expect to game for hours on end, we do get quite a few surprises here. Once again, both XMG barebones have the edge since their bigger chassis can accommodate much bigger batteries, and especially the Core 15 model delivers very impressive numbers here. Again, if you push all of them, do not expect too much, but I would imagine the majority of you guys will probably stick to your favorite games with an outlet inside. Alright folks, that should be it for today. This was not really meant to be something like a "this is the best compact gaming notebook of 2024" video, since in my opinion there's no such thing as the best. But what works for you is determined by many very individual factors. So I hope I was able to highlight the majority of key aspects for each laptop today to help you decide which one might be best for you. In general, I cannot help it but to be a little disappointed by the Helios Neo 14 and its lackluster performance results, especially considering the price. The Nitro 14, however, might be a great, more budget-oriented option, while the Zephyrus is still the combo to beat if you're looking for a hybrid between a gamer and a great everyday notebook. However, if you're serious about gaming performance or are a content creator and need a powerful and upgradable notebook, both the XMGs and the Razer are very tough to beat. If I had to decide for myself, it would be a very close call between the Fusion 15 and the Blade 14. And while the XMG has the edge with better battery life, more CPU grunt and a more generous port selection, the Blade does have the better screen with some creator-creature comforts. But it's also quite a bit more expensive. Well, as you can see, even for me it would be very hard to make a decision here. But let me know what you think, sound off in the comments below which one of our contenders today would be your pick. And if you think I missed a notebook, tell me about it. That should be all for now. Thanks a ton for watching. Do me the favor and hit that like and sub button so we can keep those videos coming. My name is Alex, you have been fantastic, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.